Part 96. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 953. Concubine Zhao Shu was only promoted during the Chinese New Year. It was because the courtiers repeated the old saying that Qi Ziyuan wanted to accept more concubines. Concubine Duan Xian, Princess of Dali, is her. The Su family and the Shi family, who also gave birth to the prince, were promoted from nobles to concubines. Now, in just over 2 months, concubine Zhao was beaten back to her original form and turned back into a concubine again. Her status after making a mistake was lower than that of concubine Su and concubine Shi. This was the first time Qi Ziyuan had dealt with a concubine since he became the throne. Not only the harem was shocked, but also the previous court was shocked, and they all asked what happened. It is very difficult to inquire about the news of the palace, but this time Qi Ziyuan did not stop the news from spreading. He went to see the demoted concubine Zhao in person, and said angrily, "The second prince was born to you, but his aunt is the queen. I don't care about it, your mother and son are affectionate, but you don't want to separate our father, son, and brother. If you let me know that you separate the crown prince and the second prince, I will never forgive you." Qi Ziyuan looked at the pale Zhao concubine and sneered, "The second prince and you are mother and son, but I am father and son, and the crown prince is brother. No matter who it is, if I know who separates their brothers, I will definitely retaliate." These words were also spread, and the courtiers who were thoughtful in the previous dynasty were silent. The meaning of the emperor's words was obvious. If anyone encouraged a few princes to compete with the crown prince and made the royal family restless, the emperor would let the other party's family restless, brother centrifuged. No emperor has ever said such a thing, and everyone seems to understand why the king of Rongjun is always unreliable sometimes. It turns out that the root cause is here. After Qi Ziyuan cleaned up concubine Zhao, he let the prince sleep with the second prince, because the second prince only wanted to follow Xiaobao except for his wet nurse. When he was still immature, apart from the wet nurse, he had the best time with the crown prince, and the crown prince was an older brother. In his heart, naturally, the crown prince was the kindest. The second prince woke up from a nightmare at night, hugging his elder brother and crying. Xiaobao could only comfort him clumsily. The 4-year-old second prince didn't understand very much. "Why does my concubine hate me? She always asks me to recite books, and hits my palm if I don't know how to recite them. She doesn't allow me to play with the prince's elder brother, or take my third and fourth brothers to play." A 4-year-old child naturally doesn't understand the issue of royal wives and concubines. He knows whoever treats him well will kiss whoever. Concubine Zhao Shu has been very proud since she gave birth to the second prince. She is the second person under the empress. As for the noble concubine Duan Xian, she does not leave the palace all year round, has no heirs, and does not compete for favor. Some people are afraid that they will forget her. But since the prince knew that he had a younger brother, he has changed. He would often go to her palace to visit him and tease him. There were very few, and the most hateful thing was that when he left, he would drag the emperor away and go directly to the queen. She originally wanted to use her children to attract the emperor, and while Long and Zhenzhen had 2 more sons, by then, she would have so many sons, while the queen only had 1 son and 1 daughter, who would lose in 20 or 30 years. It's not certain who will win, but her plan was all messed up by the prince, so how can she not hate it? And when the child was older, the emperor even asked someone to carry the child directly to Cunning Palace, and their family enjoyed themselves happily, but she guarded the empty palace alone. What's the use of her having this son? As for the second prince's childish nature, seeing the prince taking him to play so many fun things, and even taking him out of the palace to play, he respects and loves this elder brother even more. When he returns to the palace, it is the elder brother who opens his mouth and the elder brother who shuts up. Concubine Zhao Shu can't find the prince. Unlucky, it is inevitable to spread his anger on his son. Children are sensitive, and after 3 or 4 times, they will know that they are afraid, so they will naturally avoid her. In this way, the relationship between mother and child will gradually become far away, and it is best to be with the nurse who takes care of him closely. Lying beside his elder brother at this time, the second prince asked him in confusion, "Why doesn't my concubine like me?" Xiaobao wrinkled his nose. He didn't know why concubine Zhaoshu didn't like her second brother. Isn't her second brother the son of concubine Zhaoshu? In his heart, mothers should all love their children. Like his mother, fourth aunt, and cousin, they love their children very much, and it hurts so much even if they fall. But seeing his brother so sad, Xiaobao didn't tell him his guess, but patted him on the back comfortingly and said, "Concubine Zhaoshu must like you too, but maybe she is not very good at expressing it, or because she is still young, so I don't know how to take care of the children." The fourth aunt said that letting Xiaoxiang not marry a wife until he was 18 years old, saying that after marrying a young daughter-in-law, she was too young to take care of others, and she was destroying the flowers of the motherland. Although I didn't understand the latter sentence, the meaning of the first sentence was very clear, and the birth mother of the emperor's son was indeed quite small. The second prince looked at his brother with red and swollen eyes. "Is my mother and concubine still young?" Xiaobao nodded and said, "It's very small, you should call us sister when you see us outside." The second prince looked at him with pouted lips, and asked, "Then why is my concubine mother so small?" Xiaobao said solemnly, "Because the father chose your mother and concubine, and then slept with her, you will be born." Xiaobao paused, then hesitated, and said, "Fourth aunt said that this is destroying the flowers of the motherland. Father seems to have done something wrong." The second prince's attention was diverted, and he opened his eyes wide and asked, "Why am I the only one sleeping?" Xiaobao shook his head, "I don't know, we can ask the queen mother tomorrow." "Then will the father be punished for doing something wrong?" "It will definitely be punished. If you make a mistake, you will be punished." "Then what is the punishment for the father?" The conversation between the two children turned to the ends of the earth, and the servant sleeping on the footsteps was covered in cold sweat. He only hoped that he hadn't heard those words just now. The two brothers talked for half the night, and it was predictable that they got up late the next day. Xiaobao opened his eyes and stretched halfway, then suddenly froze. Seeing the sunshine in the room, he jumped up and shouted, "I'm late, I'm late." The second prince woke up startled and called out, "Brother prince." Xiaobao was about to cry or not and said, "I got up late, I was late for school, and I might be beaten at night." The servant came in from the outside, and said with a smile, "Your Highness, don't worry, the Emperor said this morning, I will give you a day's leave, and spend good time with the second prince today." Xiaobao's eyes lit up, and he breathed a sigh of relief. He dragged his second brother to get up, and after washing up, he took him to Cunning Palace to see his sister. At this time, Li Jinghua was ordering people to clean up the side hall. Since concubine Zhao wants to think about her mistakes behind closed doors, the second prince is still in her place and there will be no one to discipline him. "Let the second prince live with me first, and wait for concubine Zhao to let him go. Send it back when you're done." Wen Kui looked at the queen with a calm face, and knew that she was angry. She was planning to teach concubine Zhao personally. "Where is the emperor?" Li Jinghua smiled and said, "The emperor has already agreed." She wanted to educate the second prince well. Why would the emperor not agree? Not only will she raise the second prince well, but she will also teach him to be respectful as brothers and sisters, and to be kind and filial. It's fine to treat this child well. If it's still like that, then I can't blame her. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Zhu. Chapter 954. Concubine Zhao failed to realize her mistake. Although she restrained herself and stopped mentioning that she was not allowed to play with the prince, she kept restricting the scope of the second prince's activities. Almost as soon as the child woke up, She brought him to read and practice calligraphy. I can only play in my own palace every day, and the second prince soon couldn't stand it anymore. He lived with the prince for 3 months, and his schedule has already stabilized. Every day after getting up, the prince drinks a bowl of warm water, then washes up and goes to do health boxing, or do exercises. The time is not long, less than 2/4 of an hour. After punching, go to change clothes and have breakfast, then go to morning reading, and then listen to the teacher's lecture. It will take another year for him to start enlightenment, so naturally he will not go to school with the prince, and often at this time he will go to the queen's palace, where the maids and sisters will take over the third and fourth brothers, and take out the prince's old toys. He recognizes cards with words and pictures, and can also play with building blocks. Although he is only 4 years old, he already knows a lot of words. Sometimes the queen would tell them some short stories after handling the palace affairs. The ladies said that these were all storybooks written by the fourth aunt, specially for children. A group of children happily played until noon, each took a lunch break after lunch, and had free activities in the afternoon. Those who like it can go to the imperial garden to play, and those who don't like it can stay with their mother and concubine. I like to watch her cry, so I go to the prince's brother, and the prince's brother takes him with him. When the prince listens to the teacher's lecture, he will lie on the table and draw red. After school in the afternoon, the prince will take him to take the third brother. The fourth brother came out to play in the imperial garden together, ate and slept together at night, and the day passed like this. But when he was picked up by his concubine, the second prince was immediately pulled out of this leisurely life. He was carried to concubine mother's place every day when he opened his eyes. When the elder brother came to pick him up, concubine mother refused for various reasons, and then forced him to recite writing. The second prince, who was only 4 years old, couldn't help it for 2 days. When the prince came to pick him up again, he held the prince's hand and cried out of breath, saying let him go for nothing. Concubine Zhao hated it so much that she asked someone to pull the child away. Seeing the maid grabbing her second younger brother's arm and pulling her back, Xiaobao was furious and stepped forward and kicked her in the stomach. The maid took 2 steps back, he didn't even let go. Xiaobao was even more angry, pointing at her nose and angrily said, "Don't you dare to let go, when my cousin comes back, I will tell him to kick you." After speaking, he went to pull her hand, and just as the maid was about to let go, concubine Zhao screamed from the side, "His Royal Highness, be gentle, it hurts the second prince," but her eyes were staring at the maid. The palace lady's face was pale, she wanted to let go, but she didn't dare. Just this hesitation, the second prince directly bit her hand. The child didn't know how to control it, and almost bit her with all her strength. The palace lady howled miserably with a sound. Xiaobao hurriedly hugged his second brother to comfort him, saying, "Let her go quickly, if the emperor finds out, she will be beaten." The second prince let go immediately, and Xiaobao pulled his younger brother behind him, threatening her, "You dare to tell my father, I will beat you." After speaking, he dragged his second brother and ran out. Concubine Zhao asked someone to stop him, but the prince's attendants who had been watching from the sidelines rushed up to stop them, and the prince ran away with the second prince. The second prince was very sad. "Brother prince, I don't want to go back. My concubine always asks me to read and write. I can't even play for a while." "Obviously you have spare time. Your concubine mother is an idiot. Reading requires a combination of work and rest to be efficient. How much can you remember by sitting and reading all day like this?" "I can't remember a word, remember it now, and forget it later." The second prince looked at the elder brother adoringly. "How do you know that I can't remember it?" Xiaobao proudly said, "Of course I know, little bear is just like you." "Then can cousin bear remember it now?" Little treasure nodded. He said he could remember, but I think there must be more things he didn't remember than he remembered, but after he changed the learning method and time, he could remember more. I'm free, I'll take you to find him, let him talk to Mrs. concubine Zhao, don't force you to endorse. The second prince looked at Xiaobao gratefully. And Qi Xiaoyuan got the news early. When the two children came, he rubbed the second prince's head and asked, "You are 4 years old. I was supposed to enlighten you after you turned 5 next year. Since you are now knowing so many characters, and your mother and concubine are not in good health, would you like to be enlightened a year earlier?" The second prince asked in confusion, "Can I still play after I go to school?" Qi Xiaoyuan nodded with a smile, "I can play in my spare time." Xiaobao leaned into his ear and told him about how long he could play in a day. The second prince struggled for a long time, and asked weakly, "Can't I move to live with the Queen Mother first?" If he lived with the Empress, he would not have to go to school, nor would he need to memorize calligraphy. Qi Xiaoyuan looked at his son, who was obviously tired of studying, and shook his head slightly, saying, "I can't." The second prince drooped his head and said, "Okay, I'll go to school." At night, the two brothers were still sleeping together. Seeing the elder brother writing a letter to Xiao Xiang, the second prince went up to him and said, "Brother prince, why do you think my mother and concubine don't like me?" Xiao Bao shook his head. "Then ask my aunt for me, don't you say that my aunt is very smart." Xiaobao gave him the pen. "You can also write, you can write, ask me if you don't understand the words, I will help you write." The second prince grabbed a pen and wrote a letter to Mu Yangling excitedly. This was the first letter he wrote in his life. Mu Yangling struggled with receiving the second prince's letter for a long time, and asked Xiao Xiang, "Why did the second prince write to me? Shouldn't this kind of question be asked to his father, mother, and concubine?" Little Xiang's eyes were full of sympathy. Brother Xiaobao said that the second cousin is very pitiful now, and his mother and concubine have been grounded again, and as soon as they saw him, it was as if they wanted to eat him. Either let him stay away from Brother Xiaobao, or force him to eat him. He went to the emperor's uncle to intercede. "Mother, do you think that the second cousin was not born to Mrs. Zhao, but his mother picked it up from a tree?" Mu Yangling was embarrassed, and couldn't help but glared at Qi Heiran. He was the one who made up nonsense. Once when Hutu asked them how they got into their mother's stomach, Qi Heiran frightened them and said that the three brothers were all from him. Picked up from a tree. This made Xiao Xiang and the others remember it, and felt that everything that was not his own was picked up from a tree. Mu Yangling supported his forehead and said, "The trees in the palace do not give birth to children." "Is that picked up from the tree outside the palace?" Little Xiang tilted his head and asked with bright eyes, "Mother, which tree did the second cousin pick it up from?" "I'll go and see too, maybe I can do it too, picking up a child." "Get out, can the child be picked up casually?" Qi Heiran almost kicked his son out. Mu Yangling watched Qi Heiran beat the bear out, and then carefully pondered the letter. Qi Heiran drove his son out and closed the door, and when he saw her staring at the letter, he was annoyed. Concubine Zhao is a shit-stirring stick. Xiaobao is the eldest son, smart and capable. Now that the second prince is only old, she wants to fight for power. But she is lucky. She is the biological mother of the second prince. As long as she has this identity, she can live. Mu Yangling put the letter gently on the table, and sighed, "A child is a blank piece of paper, my lord. What kind of color you paint on it will determine what kind of person the child will become in the future. The second prince is innocent, and so is little Treasure." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 955. The second prince is small and innocent now, and can hang out with Xiaobao without any grievances, but will he be able to do so when he grows up? It's just that he doesn't want to change. The people around him, the people in the court, are willing to see their brotherly love. Why did Kangxi's 9 sons fight each other to the death? Is it really because of their own ambitions? I'm afraid they are all pulled in and forced out by others, and they cannot be guarded against. I have only heard of catching thieves from 1,000 miles away, but I have never heard of warding off thieves in 1,000 days. As long as people think wrongly, the more they do now, they will be partial in the eyes of a few children in the future, and they will only accept what they think. Instead of letting them grow up in such a secretive way, it is better to tear it open and let them see it. It is clear from a young age, so there is no misunderstanding. There are so many professions in this world, not everyone is willing to stare at the throne as soon as they come up. Mu Yangling looked at Chi Heiran inquiringly. Chi Heiran nodded solemnly and said, "Just tell the children the truth as you said, but don't scare the children, so as not to break their brotherhood. Slowly tell them, anyway, there are carrier pigeons now, so tell them slowly with the hand of Xiaoxiang, don't make big moves as soon as they come up." Mu Yangling nodded slowly, biting the pen and thinking for a long time, and finally finished writing the first letter after writing and rewriting. Considering that the 4-year-old second prince could not read a letter independently, Mu Yangling wrote the letter to the two brothers together. She comforted the second prince first. It's not that his mother and concubine don't love him, but she loves him too much. She thinks that love should give you the best thing, and your mother and concubine obviously thinks that the throne is the best thing in the world. So she wants you to snatch it, so that you can't get too close to your elder brother, so that you won't have a good relationship in the future, and it won't be easy to turn against each other. It's like in a big family, the eldest son is going to inherit the inheritance of the ancestors, and the other sons will go out after growing up to share a fortune, but now your mother thinks you are very good, she wants you to inherit the inheritance of the ancestors, then your elder brother will block your way. She naturally doesn't like you getting too close, she thinks that your father likes a well-behaved son who studies well, so she asks you to learn like that, thinking that if you are so smart and well-behaved, your father must like you very much. In the future, you may inherit the inheritance of your ancestors. Mu Yangling asked the second prince, "But do you think your father doesn't like you because you can't memorize books or write well?" "Obviously not. Your father, like thousands of fathers, wants his son to be happy and happy first, so that he can be successful and capable. You see, he never forced your elder brother to endorse." "Your mother misunderstood." Mu Yangling told the second prince, "Your mother and concubine like you, your father also likes you, your mother's queen and the prince's elder brother also like you, everyone has expectations of you, but it doesn't mean that you have to satisfy everyone's expectations. Your expectations, you should follow your own heart, you are still young, you just need to grow up happily. When you get older, you have to think about what you like, and when you get older, think about what you want to do in the future. It's best if you can meet the expectations of those who love you. If you can't, just tell them that you are very happy like this, very happy. If they really love you, they will be happy for you." As for Xiaobao, Mu Yangling only asked him, "Do you like being an emperor?" Qi Xiaoyuan was in a daze holding the flying pigeon letter, and after a long time he looked down at his two sons, opened his mouth, did not lie that your fourth aunt was playing with you, but asked, "Do you have any questions to ask your father, Emperor?" The prince turned to look at his second brother, and poked him on the back. The second prince raised his head and asked, "Father, is what the fourth aunt said true? My mother and concubine really like me." "Of course she likes you, but she likes the power you brought her even more." Qi Xiaoyuan endured these words, nodded slightly, and said, "There is no mother who doesn't like her son. You will understand when you grow up." The second prince let out a long breath and smiled happily, "It's good that my concubine likes me. I'll tell her in a while that I don't like to endorse books, I don't like to write, and I don't want to turn against my elder brother, let alone be an emperor." "Oh," Qi Xiaoyuan walked down the steps, sat on it and looked at him fixedly and asked, "Why don't you want to be emperor?" The second prince wrinkled his nose, looked at his father and the prince's elder brother sympathetically, and said, "When the emperor wakes up at 5 o'clock, he can't go to bed until very late. He can't leave the palace casually, nor can he leave Beijing, let alone go to sea. You can't use money casually, you can't follow your own temper in what you eat and drink, you don't play for an hour every day, and you have to listen to other people even when you marry a wife and take concubines. It's more terrifying than going to jail." Qi Ziyuan was in a daze for a moment, and asked, "Who told you these words?" Xiaobao couldn't stop it in time, the second prince had already shouted, "Brother Xiang said it." Mu Yangling sent the letter through Xiao Xiang's carrier pigeon, so he gave the letter directly to him. This kid has no sense of privacy, and there is no envelope on the thin piece of paper, so he just read it. He read the letter to mean Tang, the younger brother, wanted to be the emperor, so he was so happy that he couldn't find his way. He immediately took out the letter paper and wrote a letter to Xiaobao, asking him to give up the crown prince to his second cousin and come to Guangzhou to play with them. In order to convince Xiaobao, Xiao Xiang exaggerated 10 times the hardships of being an emperor, adding the sentence, "You can see the emperor's uncle for every disadvantage listed, and must also list how free they are when they go first. Happiness, their children are not counted, even his father, he also goes to sea when he wants to go out, and goes outing when he wants to go outing. Their family also bought a few hills outside Guangzhou, with warm soup on them. When winter comes, their family moves to them, go live for a while, soak in warm hot springs, eat roasted venison, and play with imported toys. Life should not be too beautiful." Xiao Xiang also told Xiaobao that he decided to go to visit the mountains, rivers, and lakes of Daqi after he was 12 years old, and invited him to see the customs of various places together, and if he became the prince, he would not even be able to leave the capital, let alone go traveled all over the place. And Xiao Xiang plans to go to Nanyang with the ship in 2 years after Daqi builds the ship, and may go further in the future. If you become the emperor, can you still do these things? So, now that there is someone who is willing to be the emperor, you should hurry up and give him the position. Come and find me here, and I will take you to play together. When Xiaobao opened the letter, Xiaoxiang's letter fell out. It happened that he knew all the words on it. After reading it, he cried, holding Xiaobao's arm and crying, saying that he should not be the emperor. Being an emperor is too pitiful, it turned out to be a lifetime prison. The second prince's cry scared the people in the East Palace, because he actually called himself not to be the emperor. How could this not make them terrified? Seeing that things were getting serious, Xiao Bao hurriedly ordered people to seal the East Palace, not to let a word out, and coaxed the second prince to say that he would not let him be the emperor, which was better. But Xiaobao was afraid that he would not be able to suppress the rumors and end up hurting his second brother, so he brought a letter and led someone to find his father. After reading Xiao Xiang's letter that was half lure and half threat, Qi Ziyuan gritted his teeth, turned his head and asked Xiao Bao, "You don't want to be emperor anymore? The reborn wife is farming." Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 956. Xiaobao had already struggled all the way, but now he nodded firmly, "I want to be the emperor." What Xiaobao said was wanting, not thinking. Qi Ziyuan raised his eyebrows slightly, and asked, "Why? Are you not afraid of hard work and freedom?" "I'm afraid," Xiaobao wrinkled his nose and said distressedly, "but I want the people all over the world to eat dry food every day, have clothes to wear in winter, children can go to school when they want to study, the elderly can retire safely, and the sick. It would be much easier if I were the emperor to be admitted to the doctor." Qi Ziyuan didn't expect his son's ambition to be so lofty. He looked at him in shock and was speechless for a while, but thinking of the education he received and the things he did since he was a child, it seemed natural for him to think this way. Qi Ziyuan went to touch his head, and asked in a low voice, "Then, don't you envy the bears and the others as they travel around the world and visit mountains and rivers?" Little Treasure nodded, slightly disappointed. "So father, Can I go and play first, and come back to be the emperor after I have had enough fun? No. Chi Ziyuan rubbed his head amusedly and said, I'm afraid you won't want to come back after you go out. Besides, if you want to be a good emperor, you have to keep studying. You are a prince now. Do you know what a prince is? The prince is the prince who will be the emperor in the future. Xiaobao said his own understanding. Qi Ziyuan laughed loudly. That's a good understanding, because being an emperor requires a lot of skills, and you are learning those skills now, so if you want to be an emperor, you can't play as you like. Although Xiaobao was mentally prepared, he was still very disappointed, and said unwillingly, maybe fourth aunt will have a way. Qi Ziyuan didn't think Mu Yangling could do anything, but he couldn't block his son's way, so he said with a smile, then you can ask your fourth aunt later. The second prince looked at his eldest brother sympathetically, feeling that he was so pitiful for him who was going to be the emperor. Qi Ziyuan turned his head to look at his second son, touched his head and said, your mother has become obsessed, don't tell her about this in advance, you can mention it to her after she is freed from the restraint this time, and you can come and ask if you don't understand. Father, you can also ask your fourth uncle and aunt. Also, you are already a young adult. If you are enlightened, you will no longer be able to live in the palace of your mother and concubine. You see, your prince brother will move out of Cunning Palace as soon as he is enlightened. Live, if you live alone, are you afraid? The second prince was indeed a little scared, but he patted his chest and said, I'm not afraid. Qi Ziyuan smiled and said, it doesn't matter if you are afraid, let your elder brother accompany you for a while, and then live alone when you are no longer afraid. The second prince breathed a sigh of relief, took the prince's hand and went back. Qi Ziyuan watched the two children's backs disappear, and the smile on his face fell. He took out Zioxiang's letter and read it again. After grinding his teeth, he wrote to him, expressing his apology for his behavior of abducting Xiaobao. Angry, Qi Ziyuan swiped his pen and punished him not to ride a horse for 10 days, and to write 500 sheets of big characters, and he would let people watch him in the dark. The little bear who received the letter from the flying pigeon wailed, why did brother Xiaobao show the letter to Uncle Huang? Only at this time did Qi Heiran know what his son had done, and he was so angry that he chased him around the yard 3 times with a rattan cane, and angrily added 5 days of not being able to ride a horse and 300 sheets of paper on top of Qi Ziyuan's punishment. Xiaoxiang wrote to Xiaobao overnight, asking him to intercede for him, not riding a horse for half a month, this is simply killing him. And Mu Yangling also received letters from Xiaobao and the second prince. This time, she still wrote letters to the second prince and Xiaobao. Apart from answering their questions, she continued the previous topic. Regarding Xiaobao's worry about traveling, Mu Yangling felt that it was not a problem at all. She couldn't understand why the princes of the previous dynasties could not leave the capital and had to stay in the capital. As a prince, he will manage the entire country in the future, facing the entire world, because we can't just focus on our own country, it will be very narrow. Therefore, here comes the problem. As the managers of the country in the future, their understanding of their country only comes from books and documents. I have never been out of the capital. So Mu Yangling suggested that Xiaobao can ask the emperor to go out to practice in Beijing when he is a little older and has learned enough, just like a scholar who is a scholar in the examination or a scholar after being promoted. Reading thousands of books is not as good as traveling thousands of miles. Works for everyone. However, Mu Yangling hoped that Xiaobao would remember that he did not travel for fun, but to understand the country so that he could manage him better in the future. Besides, when he has a good successor, he can give him the seat. When people are old, they should do things that they wanted to do but couldn't do when they were young, such as indulging in mountains and rivers, such as sailing to sea. Learn some skills that I wanted to learn when I was young but have never been able to learn or have no time to learn. As an emperor, this is obviously impossible, because every move affects the people of the world, so it is better to abdicate. Mu Yangling told Xiaobao that people should not be tired after 60. At this time, abdicate to the children and grandchildren. Just go and toss. Xiaobao did some calculations, and felt that he was too far away from turning 60, so he should first convince his father to let him go out of Beijing to practice. As for the second point, wait until he has a son. Xiaobao went to beg his father. Qi Xiaoyuan has learned to be smart. After listening to Xiaobao's request, he asked to read the letter, even Xiaoxiang's. He felt that although Mu Yangling had a good way of educating children, he might not be suitable for the prince, so he should be more cautious. She wrote something that should not have been written in the letter, so that he could correct it in time. Seeing this, Qi Xiaoyuan's heart was almost scared out. Mu Yangling's letter, every sentence, every word is a bit treasonous. If the content of the letter is accidentally leaked out, the courtiers will have to impeach her for bad intentions and treason. Why can't the prince leave Beijing? That's the emperor guarding against his son. If he doesn't leave the capital, he's right under the emperor's nose. The emperor knows about the power he has developed, but if he leaves the capital, the sky is high and the emperor is far away. What are you doing outside? When the time comes, will the world belong to the prince or the emperor? Second, it is too dangerous for the prince to leave Beijing. How many princes are there fighting for the throne? Don't you squeeze your head to this position every time. There is also the family behind the princes. Even if the princes don't want to make a move, their mother clan will probably force them to make a move. The crown prince is in the capital, under the eyes of the emperor Laozi, his safety is guaranteed, but outside the capital, everything is possible. Therefore, for the safety of himself and the prince, the emperor never allowed the prince to leave the capital, and the princes of all dynasties would not leave the capital, nor could they leave the capital, except for the investigation of corruption and disaster relief. Someone who didn't know Mu Yangling read this letter and definitely thought that she was instigating Xiaobao to rebel or trying to lure him out of the capital to kill him. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 957. There is also the matter of the Zen seat. He is the emperor now. Qi Xiaoyuan knows that she is just talking about the matter, and let Xiaobao give up the position to his son when he gets older, and go out to play by himself. But others don't know. Anyone who reads this letter will think that she is implying that he should give the throne to Xiaobao in the future. And as the supreme emperor, can he leave Beijing? No, the emperors of all dynasties had to obtain the consent of the emperor even to leave the palace where he lived. Of course, they didn't just voluntarily sit in Zen. Except for the sage kings in the Yao and Shun era, which one of the later emperors who were in Zen was not forced. Qi Xiaoyuan shook his head. I thought your fourth aunt was much more stable than your fourth uncle, who knows that she is also a careless person. Can you say that casually? But I think my fourth aunt is right, father. When I turn 10 years old, you can let me go out to practice. Qi Xiaoyuan flicked his head and said, isn't there still 2 years left? I think it's the little bear who hooked your heart. It's not that Qi Xiaoyuan doesn't trust his son, but he's afraid of danger. Let alone assassination, disease alone is a big hidden danger. Being unaccustomed to the environment can kill people. Xiaobao looks no worse than his peers now, but when he was born, his body was much weaker than ordinary children. For the first 3 years, he was almost soaked in medicine jars. Medicinal diet, and practicing health-preserving boxing, this is better. How dare he let him out of Beijing? Qi Xiaoyuan refused. Even if Xiaobao almost rolled on the ground, he didn't agree. He just told his son, if you really want to travel around, then try to have a capable son, give him the seat in the future, and go out to play by yourself. If the son voluntarily takes the Zen position, I believe the grandson will not lock him up in the palace, right? Xiaobao's eyes were reddish, but 60 is a long way off, and it won't be until 52 years ago. Just by counting, he felt that his eyes were getting dark. Qi Xiaoyuan laughed loudly, rubbed his head and said, "What a fool, you really plan to take the Zen position after the age of 60. How many people in this world can live past 60? If your son is not stupid, you will. If you can live a long and healthy life, you can give him the Zen seat at the age of 50. Qi Xiu's eyes were full of expectations. He knew his destiny at 50, and in the royal family, it is not bad to live past 50. Xiaobao looked at his father, hugged his waist suddenly and said, "Father, you can live past 80. Qi Xiaoyuan caressed his back and said with a smile, "According to your auspicious words, Father thinks it is pretty good to live past 60. Qi Xiaoyuan's heart moved slightly. If he lived long enough, it would be all right to give up the throne to Xiaobao. Heiran has traveled all over the world, but he hasn't traveled anywhere except the north of the Yangtze River, and what Ling said is not bad. He has worked hard for half his life, why can't he do something he likes when he is old?" At this time, Qi Heiran was teaching his wife by jumping around. When the couple went to sleep at night, they routinely talked about what they did today. Mu Yangling casually mentioned a few words about the letter she wrote to Xiaobao. Fall out of bed. His political sensitivity is a bit off, but that doesn't mean he's stupid. He just thought of what Qi Xiaoyuan thought of after a while. He didn't care about going to bed anymore, so he was busy adding common sense to his wife. Mu Yangling's thinking is still connected to his previous life. How could he have thought of this? So he could only open his mouth and ask, just for this reason, the prince was detained in the capital. But the prince stayed in the capital, and I didn't see any competition for the throne. Ah, from Qin to the present, how many princes have ascended the throne, and how many princes have sent troops to seize the throne? They can all be counted with one slap, and compared with the prince's base number, they are simply rare. Qi Heiran was silent. I think this is human psychology, because the crown prince is the closest to the throne, and when the emperor dies, he will be able to take over the throne. The psychology of wanting to force the palace to rebel is the weakest, but the other princes are not. They either force the prince to death, or force the emperor to death. They are the most likely to force the palace. Of course, this is from the perspective of interests, but the human being is not entirely based on interests. He has human nature. I have concerns. After all, it is a minority who kill their fathers and brothers just for a position, and we cannot deprive the happiness of the majority for the sake of the minority. And, do you think the precautions of the emperors of all dynasties have worked? Mu Yangling said, aren't you good at forming cliques or competing for positions? This has nothing to do with leaving Beijing. On the contrary, I think that letting the princes go out of Beijing to have a look around can broaden their horizons and prevent them from always looking at the 1-acre land in the capital. All he thinks about is the throne. The world is so big. If he really wants to be emperor, there is a large piece of land across the sea outside Guangzhou. Qi Heiran was listening carefully at first, but when he heard the sentence, he immediately stopped her. Come on, it's a barren land. I don't even want to give it to my master, and people who are away from home are cheap. Who wants to leave their homeland? Mu Yangling looked at him pouting, but didn't refute. Not to mention these ancient people, even she would not think of leaving China or her hometown. Okay, even if you are right, you can convince Brother Huang, but there is one thing you can't do, Xiaobao, so you can't leave Beijing easily, Qi Heiran said. What's up? Disease, Qi Heiran said in a deep voice. Acclimatization, dysentery, plague, these are all diseases that can kill people. If it weren't for the bears and the others who accompanied us all over the world since childhood without any discomfort, I would not let you, my mother and I will take office with me. There is only one prince, not to mention the emperor. Even the courtiers will never allow him to go out of Beijing to take risks. Mu Yangling had infinite sympathy for Xiaobao. Then he really can't go out to visit mountains and rivers. No, it's because of experience. Qi Heiran glanced at her, but didn't expose her, and said, There is only the second way. In the future, he will give his Zen seed to his son, and come out to play after he abdicates. Mu Yangling regretted, it would be great if Daki's medical skills can be improved to cure all these diseases. Chi Heiran pursed his lips, and said, in ancient times, medical skills were still spread, but now they are teachers and students, passed down from father to son. It is very rare for outsiders to learn medical skills. Seeing Mu Yangling looking at him in surprise, Chi Heiran became angry from embarrassment. You think you don't understand anything? This is like fighting. Martial arts and warfare are passed down from family to family. You can go to the bookstore to look for it, if you can find it. How many books on the art of war have been published? That's why there is a saying that 1,000 troops are easy to get, but a general is hard to find. If you don't learn the art of war, you can only find out by yourself in the battle. And why did the hereditary military function go further and rise faster in the army? Not only because of his family's connections in the army, but also because of his inheritance. He can learn the art of war, and he has a higher starting point than those mud-legged people. Chi Heiran pointed in the direction of his study. Do you really think that, master, those military books in the study were bought from bookstores? They were found by my uncles for my elder brother, and my elder brother passed them on to me. When I was young, I almost lost half my life in a fight to get a book of military affairs. And Zijin helped me buy a manuscript, which cost no less than 1,000 taels, which is even more expensive than those antique calligraphy and paintings. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 958. In addition to military books, medical books and books involving craftsmanship are also difficult to find in bookstores. Most of them are handed down from person to person. Chi Heiran sighed and said, why can a family be a family? It's not because he has a lot of money. It's because he has a lot of books, and if there are more books, there will be more inheritance, and with knowledge, they will never fall into a slump. Even if they fall, it is only temporary, and they will learn the skills to make a comeback. This is the monopoly of knowledge, Mu Yangling asked, holding his arm. Then what kind of books does our family have? Chi Heiran glanced at her, and said, didn't you glance at all the books in our study room? Do you know what books are there? Apart from the 4 books and 5 classics, the most common ones are military books, miscellaneous talks, and agricultural books. What about the palace? Chi Heiran showed a smile. There are quite a lot of books in the palace. At that time, the capital was not too chaotic, so the books in the palace library were preserved, but the collection of books is still not as good as those of those aristocratic families. There are 3 library buildings in the palace, each with 2 floors. Mu Yangling couldn't help but click his tongue. There are so many books in the family, no wonder the family is respected. For this alone, those scholars are willing to be driven by the family. Chi Heiran nodded. Emperor Sejong of the previous dynasty knew this, so he had the audacity to ask the aristocratic family to take out the collection of books for the royal bookstore to publish. He wanted to build a royal library and open it to scholars all over the world. It's a pity that the project just started. The war broke out in the north again, and when Emperor Sejong came back to pacify the north, he became seriously ill within 2 years. At that time, the collection was only half printed. Seeing this, the aristocratic families took back the collection one after another. No matter how much the royal bookstore begged, they refused to take it again. When the book was published, Emperor Jaozong, who was the prince at the time, sympathized with the aristocratic family, so he decided to stop the publication. It is said that Emperor Sejong was so angry that he vomited blood and died within 2 days. Jaozong was close to the family, and after he came to the throne, he directly cancelled the project of the royal library because the national treasury was empty, and collected the printed books into the library of the palace. When Emperor Jinjian fled south, he only took part of his collection with him, and the rest were either destroyed by the flames of war, divided up by his family, or robbed by the big gold, so don't look at the current library of the palace. Less than 1/3 of what it was under Emperor Sejong. Qi Heiran just doesn't like reading, so he sighed when he mentioned this matter. He knows that culture is the inheritance, and books are the carrier of culture. The books inherited by Da Qi are too few, and the background is too low. How do you know these things? Zijin told me about it. Qi Heiran folded his hands behind his head, lay on the bed, crossed his legs and said, he wanted to find some rare books, but he couldn't find them after searching for a long time. He doesn't believe in evil. I ran to look through the bibliography of Emperor Sejong. After all, it is not a secret that Emperor Sejong asked for books to be published when he came to the family for the 3rd time. Every scholar knows that he does not believe that there are only so few books in the library. When he came out, 5 big boxes had to be used to store the bibliographical books, and the existing books were less than half of the original ones. After reading the secret history at that time, he almost ran to the tomb of Emperor Jiaozong to yell at him. When he complained to the master, father naturally knows. Fan Zijin is not a good person, but he is a scholar, and he is also a scholar who loves books. How can he not be angry when he sees a good royal library being tossed by Gao Zone with a single sentence? Actually, elder brother can accomplish what Emperor Sejong failed to accomplish. Mu Yangling felt that Sejong, a time traveler, is still very powerful. If he could live a few more years, maybe Dezhou would not be what he is now, but she was very curious. As a time traveler, how on earth did he raise his son so high that he opposed him in everything? Not now, Qi Heiran said. Nowadays the people's livelihood and the frontier are the key. Let alone the cost of publishing and printing books, it is very difficult to communicate with the aristocratic family. The aristocratic family is not obliged to contribute the collection of books. Emperor Sejong can succeed. But don't be so shameless, almost begging the family, and ceding a lot of benefits, half begging and half forcing people to take out the book. First, I don't want the emperor to suffer this humiliation. Second, the family is better than before. They are already much weaker, and if they press each other again, I am afraid that there will be chaos, so this matter cannot be done, at least not within 10 years. Mu Yangling smiled and said, I didn't ask my eldest brother to ask for books from the family. It is enough for us to print the books of our own family and the palace. After finishing this part, we will call on everyone to donate books. How many books does the family have? But there are also a lot of books in the royal family. In the early days, these books alone were more than enough. Even Zijin, how many books did he read in the library? Then we began to accept book donations. Those aristocratic families might not want to take out the books. But there are many ministers in the court and scholars all over the world, so don't they all want to contribute to the country? At that time, there will be no difference between whether the family donates or not. Qi Heiran was puzzled at first, then his eyes lit up, and he sat up. That's right, we won't beg them, a soft knife will grind them to death. The aristocratic family is unwilling to share the books because they want to monopolize knowledge. No matter what system the court uses to select officials, they will always have the upper hand. Because they have monopolized rich educational resources, which cannot be achieved by other common people or even farming and studying families. But if the royal library is open to people all over the world, allowing people to borrow and copy, then their advantage will be weakened. Even if the books of the royal library are not as good as those of the aristocratic family, it is already enough for the imperial examination officials. It is enough, and for technical talents, the books in the library can also let them get started or even go a step further, which is better than ignorant groping. And systematic education has the benefits of systematic education, and wild ones also have the advantages of wild ones. Who can be sure that the wild ones will not soar to the sky and surpass the domesticated ones? The most important thing is that their base is far greater than the number of aristocratic families. What they are facing is the common people of the whole world, but the family is only for the people of their family, and even the people of their family may not be able to enter the library of the family to borrow. The aristocratic family is not an iron bucket. Mu Yangling said that they can be divided from now on. The husband and wife talked more and more vigorously. Both of them were imaginative figures, and they were private conversations between husband and wife. It only took a while for the two of them to lean head to look forward to the majestic royal library. All the subjects belonged, and the aristocratic families were defeated one after another. Mu Yangling said with a smile, "This is the bloodless war." Emperor Sejong was too anxious back then. "Don't worry, he's about to die. You see, once he dies, all his previous efforts will be in vain. So people's lifespan is limited, and the education of future generations is extremely important. Otherwise, no matter how hard we ancestors are, the achievements we have made will be in vain." Mu Yangling sighed. The efforts made by Emperor Sejong for more than 20 years were ruined. If Emperor Sejong had not left a strong family background, Dezhou would have perished at that time. So in truth, this is an unprecedented cheating character. Qi Heiran pondered, "Are we being too lenient to our sons?" Mu Yangling was also pondering, and leaned on him and said, "Why don't you be stricter from tomorrow?" "Is it still too late?" Qi Heiran hesitated. "Didn't you say that you are old at the age of 3? Now the 3 children are all over the age of 3. Mu Yangling said firmly, "Then be upright." As a result, a good wife teaching class was abruptly broken by the couple into a discussion about teaching their children. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 959. Qi Ziyuan felt that his brother and sister-in-law were born to find problems for him, and he was still struggling with the children's education, so Qi Heiran found something for him to do again. He really thinks that the Royal Library is easy to manage. There are so many scholars in the world, and they are scattered all over the world. This library is built in the capital, and it is said to benefit the people of the world. Flocking to Beijing after reading this book will cost as much as the travel expenses. For the poor people, this is simply impossible. So he directly refused and told him, "Unless you can build libraries in every state capital, otherwise this matter can only be a waste of money. If you want to collect books, the library in the palace is open to you." "Which one?" Qi Heiran hadn't done anything yet. Fan Zijin got excited first, listed a series of bibliographies first, and handed over the business to Mu Yangling's bookstore. "Let your manager at the Beijing bookstore handle it, and I will count the money for you later." Mu Yangling glanced at the bibliography, and found that all the sub-collections and hundreds of schools were included, and there were even a lot of topographical miscellaneous talks. She immediately said, "Just give me the cost, and I will let them print 10 volumes each. Our 2 families each want 1 volume, and the rest will be stored in the bookstore first, although Brother Huang said that it will cost a lot, but in fact I don't mind lending him the money first. This is to drive the ducks to the shelves." Fan Zijin twitched the corners of his mouth and said, "You can do whatever you want, but if you can't collect the book in the end, don't blame me for not reminding you. This royal library is really difficult to manage." Mu Yangling was very open-minded. The big deal is that it will be sold in the bookstore at that time. Are the books still worried about selling? This is not the past life. Books are one of the most worrying things to sell, but now Daki's national power is getting stronger, the country needs talents, and the reading atmosphere is getting better and better. Books will only become better and better for sale, and what they publish is the Imperial Palace Library. Some of the books in the bookstore cannot be found in bookstores outside. Therefore, Mu Yangling asked people to print more, and she was not afraid of losing money at all, but the funds would be taken up. After all, paper and ink are not cheap in this era, but Mu Yangling is not worried about money at all, because her glass workshop, the first batch of mirrors, has been officially launched, and the watch workshop has also launched wall clocks and pocket watches. In a word, Mu Yangling is not short of money now. With a wave of his hand, Mu Yangling, who was not short of money, asked the steward of Jingzhou bookstore to go to the palace to find someone to ask for the book, and quickly published it. He also asked Zhu Liang to go back to Beijing in person to clean up several courtyards of the palace and make it a library. Keep books in good storage. In addition, Mu Yangling also asked Zhu Liang to be responsible for the sales of glass and clocks. In addition to wholesale to merchants in various places, they also opened 2 shops to sell the products produced by these 2 workshops. The glass workshop and watch workshop are located in Guangdong, a little far from the bustling Jiangnan. People there don't know that they can produce these things, so Zhu Liang also shoulders the important task of promoting mirrors and watches when he returns to Beijing this time. There were 5 carriages accompanying Zhu Liang to Beijing, 2 of which were gifts for the filial piety in the palace and relatives in Beijing, and the remaining 3 carriages were samples for Zhu Liang's business talks. Most of the 2 cars were for Li Jinghua and the children. Most of them were Western objects that little Xiong and his 3 younger brothers were shopping for, and there was also a set of Western pink tutu skirts for Princess Pearl. When Zhu Liang returned to the capital, he first handed the sign to the palace before returning home to freshen up. It was almost after he changed his clothes that the people in the palace sent him in to answer. Zhu Liang didn't dare to be negligent. He asked people to pack his things and sent them to the palace to pass the security check, and at the same time went into the palace to answer. Zhu Liang was taken all the way to the side hall of Cunning Palace. He knew that the one who wanted to see him was the queen, but as soon as he entered, he heard the laughter of the child. Zhu Liang didn't dare to lift his head, so he took 2 steps inside, just knelt down and kowtowed. The female official said, "No courtesy." Zhu Liang then stood up and stood on a book with his head bowed, and looked up quietly, and saw the queen sitting on it with the princess in her arms, and 3 boys sitting on the soft couch beside him. They should be the 2nd prince and the 3rd prince with the 4th prince. Zhu Liang lowered his eyes and bowed to wait. The queen smiled and asked, "I haven't seen your princess for a long time, is she okay?" "Thanks to your mother's blessings, the princess is in good health." "What did she bring us this time, and she sent you back to Beijing?" Li Jinghua was curious about this, but she asked Aling, who always said that she understood things when she saw them, and Xiaobao obviously didn't understand. Knowing something, but also hiding it from her, but the 2nd prince is half knowledgeable, and can only call baby. So she was very curious about what kind of treasure made Mu Yangling send her the big housekeeper back. You must know that Zhu Liang helped Mu Yangling handle most of the affairs of the palace. Just as Zhu Liang was about to answer, there was the sound of singing promises outside. Zhu Liang hurriedly stepped aside. Li Jinghua brought the 4 children to the door, and the emperor came in holding Xiao Bao's hand. "Didn't it mean that Aling brought us a baby, is it? Where are things?" The things were quickly sent to Cunning Palace through the security check. The children were very happy to see so many strange and weird Western gadgets, and they sat on the carpet to choose what they liked. But Li Jinghua held a mirror and looked at herself in surprise, touched her cheek, and took a long time to let out a breath. Qi Ziyuan played with an exquisite pocket watch, and asked calmly, "Is this all made by the workshop of the palace?" "Yes, it was only developed this spring. I have been stockpiling the goods for 4 months, and they are selling well in Guangdong. My lady asked me to go back to Beijing to find merchants, and see if the merchants in Jiangnan are willing to cooperate." "Sure enough, it's a treasure." Qi Ziyuan smiled. "No wonder their husband and wife dare to propose building a royal library." He put the pocket watch into the box, closed it again, looked at Zhu Liang, and asked, "What else do you have to do when you return to Beijing this time besides discussing business?" The prince's mansion and the duke's mansion discussed publishing a batch of books and storing them. The princess said to print a few more volumes and store them first. If they want to open the royal library, they can just move them and don't need to reprint them, so as not to waste manpower. Increase the cost. If it is not open, then send it to various bookstores for sale. The books in the palace are all good, so don't worry about not being able to sell them. Your palace is rich, so you don't have to worry about those books taking up the funds. Chi Xiaoyuan knocked on the table and said, since your concubine ordered you to do so, then print a few more copies. After Li Jinghua waited for Zhu Liang to leave, he hurriedly asked, Your Majesty, are you really planning to build a royal library? I'm afraid the adults in the court are unwilling to take money from the national treasury. Although your internal treasury still has money, it is not enough. It's worth it for you to spend so much. Qi Xiaoyuan smiled and said, even if I stop what Heiran and Aling want to do now, they will make troubles in the future, so it's better to accept it here. I don't have the money, but there are many houses and people. They don't want to do it now. I didn't expect it to become very popular. Since it's the case, it doesn't matter if the library is smaller, the big deal is to build it later when I have money. I remember that there is a house in Linguo Zijian left by Zhou Shilang, the former Minister of Official Affairs. Let's put the books in it first. Aren't the students of Guo Zijian making a noise recently and asking me to reduce the number of soldiers? Just find something for them. Do it, let them take care of the borrowing of these books, so that I won't always be troubled by doing nothing. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 960. Li Jinghua couldn't help opening his mouth. Qi Xiaoyuan saw it was funny, and laughed in a low voice. When Emperor Sejong wanted to build the royal library, the world was peaceful and the treasury was full. But now I'm a poor man, so I naturally want to be more frugal. Li Jinghua couldn't help laughing, and thought for a while and said, although the palace has a rich collection of books, it still doesn't include all the books in the world. My Li clan also has a lot of books. I will ask my elder brother to write a bibliography to share with the palace. Compare it with the one in the palace, and if there is no one in the palace, let the palace print a copy. Qi Xiaoyuan held her hand and smiled softly, thank you Zitong. Li Jinghua looked at him and smiled. When Princess Mingzu saw it, she dropped the clothes she had just pulled out, squeezed into the middle of her parents and shouted, Father, Queen, you have forgotten me again. Li Jinghua blushed slightly, and nodded her little nose, while Qi Xiaoyuan laughed and hugged her daughter on his knees, and affectionately nodded her forehead and said, Father, no one will forget my little girl princess. The second prince picked up a lot of good things and shouted at his father, Father, these are all mine. The third prince and the fourth prince stopped playing after hearing the words, and rushed to gather things to their side. Xiaobao took care of one and comforted the other, and was so busy that he was sweating profusely. Qi Xiaoyuan nodded secretly when he saw it. He was worried that Mu Yangling's clear statement would make their brothers divorce, but during this time, Xiaobao treated his three younger brothers as before, and he was not on guard. I never hated him, but if he pretended to be deep-hearted, he wouldn't believe it even if he killed Qi Xiaoyuan. The son he raised knew that he couldn't pretend to be in his heart, so this was his son's real reaction. Qi Xiaoyuan has been afraid that if he mentions it again and again, he will remember that his younger brother will compete with him for the throne when he grows up, so he has been avoiding it, but at this time, he wants to have a deeper talk with his son. Qi Xiaoyuan thought for a while, and said to the queen, let Xiaobao accompany me to live in the health palace at night, and you can take the pearl with you. The queen knew that he had something to say to Xiaobao, but she didn't know that Mu Yangling broke the seizure of the throne matter, and thought that the emperor wanted to teach her son something like before, so she readily agreed. Concubine Zhao was still under confinement, so the second prince still lived with Xiaobao, and Qi Xiaoyuan carried him over as well. The second prince was young and fell asleep right after taking a bath. Qi Xiaoyuan put the second son into the bed, and let Xiaobao in too. The father and son slept on the same bed. Qi Xiaoyuan asked, what story did your fourth aunt tell you recently? Talking about the story of Tang Prime Minister Li Linfu's plan to demote Lu Xun, the servant of the Ministry of War, and Yan Tingzi, the governor of Zhangzhou, the fourth ant said that Li Linfu's mouth is full of swords. Let us keep in mind that the good words usually seem to be for our sake. It is really for our sake. People like Li Linfu are hypocrites. Xianzong lost a lot of talents because of this, and history books often demote Li Linfu, but the fourth ant said that in terms of these two things alone, Li Linfu was very wrong, accounting for 3 points. Lu Xun and Yan Tingzi accounted for 3 points, and the other 4 points belonged to Xianzong, because Xuanzong's employment was careless first, which led to this situation. The fourth ant said that ordinary people can't control others, but we are the superiors, but we can teach others. If we stand upright, the people below will naturally be upright. People trained me, because the ministers depend on our faces to some extent. Fourth ant said, as long as we don't lose our principles, we won't be easily deceived. I remember that Mr. Chen from the Hanlin Academy has already started to tell you the history of Tang Dynasty. Didn't he talk about Li Linfu? Speaking of which, Master Chen and the fourth ant said differently. The fourth ant only picked stories to tell us, and there will be analysis later, which is very interesting. Xiaobao turned over and got up, and asked the servant to go back to his palace to bring his letter box. Qi Xiaoyuan picked out Xiaoxiang's and only looked at Mu Yangling's. The story of Mu Yangling is indeed different from that told by the Hanlin Academy. When the Hanlin Academy explained these two stories, it would only say, in a certain year and a certain month, Li Linfu hated Yan Tingzi's talent and learning, and designed to demote him. But Mu Yangling told Xiaobao that when Li Linfu heard Xuanzong's appreciation for Yan Tingzi, he first recruited Yan Tingzi's younger brother to hint that the emperor appreciated Yan Tingzi, so he could take the opportunity to report his illness and return to Beijing to seek promotion, and Yan Tingzi appealed to him according to his plan. However, Li Linfu told Xianzong that Yan Tingzi was old and seriously ill. Why not give him a spare job and let him return to his hometown to recuperate? Xianzong regretted it and gave him a spare job. The cause, process, and result are very detailed and vivid. It also lists the possible results of several Yan Tingzi's different countermeasures. The final conclusion shows that Li Linfu is talking about the sword, but Yan Tingzi can't stand the temptation and delusions. It is also a major reason to seek a high position by means of extraordinary means. We cannot blame others for being cruel, but we can only reflect on our own stupidity, because you cannot control what others think and do, you can only control yourself. Qi Xiaoyuan felt that Mu Yangling's story was really good, so he took advantage of the opportunity and asked Xiaobao, now you know that your younger brothers may compete with you for the throne when they grow up, do you blame them? Xiaobao shook his head, nodded again, and said, I don't blame it now, maybe I will in the future. After all, my younger brothers don't have this kind of thought, and they haven't competed with me for the throne. Then why not eliminate this possibility from now on? Xiaobao asked confusedly, people's hearts are uncontrollable, how can we stop this? Qi Xiaoyuan smiled and said, you can raise your younger brothers, or you can make your father hate them, or suppress the forces behind them, so that they have no supporters. Xiaobao wrinkled his nose and said, how can you raise and abolish the younger brothers because of something that hasn't happened yet? That's too unfair to them, father, they are your sons, will you hate them? Didn't the fourth ant say, are children the darlings of their parents? How could the emperor hate his darling? Qi Xiaoyuan laughed softly, and stroked his head, then you just watch your brothers grow up and threaten your status. Xiaobao said solemnly, father, first of all, I don't believe that my younger brothers will threaten my status. Even if they compete with me for the throne, I am confident that I can win them. If I lose, it is because I am inferior to others. Secondly, I am your son, and they are your sons. If they really want to fight with me, I will be sad, but I will not be defensive against them when they don't know anything because of this. Then when are you willing to do it? When they make a move, Xiaobao said solemnly, if they make a move, I will not be soft. Xiaobao pulled his fist and said, I am also very powerful. Qi Xiaoyuan asked in a low voice, then what if you lose? Xiao Bao tilted his head and thought for a long time, and said with red eyes, if I lose, I will beat up the person who robbed me of the throne, and then go to sea with Little Bear. Qi Xiaoyuan was taken aback for a moment, and asked, don't fight to the end. You are the crown prince, as long as you wave your arms, you might be able to regain the throne. Xiao Bao shook his head sadly, that would not only lead to death, but my younger brothers would also die. If our brothers kill each other, father will be so sad. Qi Xiaoyuan's eyes suddenly turned red, he hugged his son and said with a choked smile, good son. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 961. Seeing that there is no quarrel between his sons, Qi Xiu puts his heart down and concentrates on handling state affairs. He is very interested in the stories that Mu Yangling told the children, and every once in a while he would read the letter from Xiao Bao. Seeing that he read the letter from his fourth aunt instead of Xiao Xiang, Xiao Bao was also happy to give it to him. He saw that in order to protect his privacy, he even found a box to separate the two letters. Qi Xiaoyuan noticed his son's little thoughts. Although he was curious about what he and Xiao Xiang would write, considering that children have secrets, he didn't take a peek at it. Qi Xiaoyuan just missed the plan of the two children to escape from the capital. With Xiao Xiang as a comparison, Xiao Bao didn't want to stay in the capital for the rest of his life, so he asked Xiao Xiang if there was any other way for him to leave the capital. The two friends thought of countless ways and found it impossible. Little Bear can only ask his brothers for advice. Qi Xiaoyuan didn't know what schemes these brats had planned for his son. At this time, he was summoning several doctors and student representatives from the Imperial College. For the time being, the book is jointly published by the Royal Bookstore and the Wangfu Bookstore. He only needs to provide some paper and ink, and don't ask him about the labor cost. The labor cost in this era is negligible. And the printed originals are all taken from the library of the palace. The library was located in the mansion of Zhoushilang of the Ministry of War of the former dynasty. After the defeat of the former dynasty, the houses of these officials who followed the former second prince were also ransacked, and the houses were naturally confiscated. The house is not big, with only 3 entrances, but it is more than enough to store the books they have published. Think about it, a 3-entry house with a small garden is equivalent to a small park in modern times. Qi Xiaoyuan asked people to open up several rooms in Xiangyang, and cleared out a total of 3 courtyards. The others were locked with locks, and the walls of the opened rooms were simply painted. He didn't even want to pay for new bookshelves. Let the guards and servants go to the prisoner's house to carry the ready-made ones. The house was ransacked, and the books and other valuables were brought into the treasury and internal treasury, but the bookshelves were left untouched, so everyone looked for one. The bookshelves of the officials are all the same height, even the grids are similar, but the woods are different and the colors are also different. It is really unsightly to put them together, because the ancients, especially the scholars, have some cleanliness and have a cleanliness about reading. The guards tried their best to put the ones with the same color in 1 yard. Anyway, there are 3 yards. Although the final arrangement was a bit nondescript, it barely caught the eye. It's not that there were no guards or internal servants who persuaded the emperor tactfully, but Qi Xiaoyuan blocked them with one sentence: the treasury is out of money, and my internal treasury is also out of money. In a word, no money. Although the anger made the officials calm down last time, there are many people who continue to stare at his internal treasury secretly. Qi Xiaoyuan's move is to tell the whole world, especially the scholars, that he has no money, but as the emperor, he still does his best. Do your best for the welfare of the people. Where can you find such a good emperor? Of course, Other places have saved money, so there is no reason to spend money on manpower. If you want to say what is the best thing about being an emperor, it is nothing more than having countless people who can call on you. For example, the students in the Imperial College, or even the students in the academies inside and outside the capital, they study to sell to the emperor's family, and they must be very happy to be driven by the emperor. Qi Ziyuan was right. The student representatives standing in front of him were so happy that they almost fainted. 10 student representatives, some come from powerful families, some from civil servant families, more from ordinary farming and studying families, and 2 are poor students who were admitted to the Imperial College by their own ability. It can be said that every class students are included. It was the first time for everyone to see the emperor, except for the sons of powerful families and third-rank civil servants who had the honor of seeing the emperor when they accompanied their father to the palace for a banquet. But in the past, when they went to the banquet, they could only take a sneak peek from a distance, and their whole bodies were blurred. How could they stand in the hall and be received by the emperor in person? It was only then that everyone discovered that the emperor was so tall and handsome. Also, the emperor was born as a general on horseback, so he was naturally tall, and the emperor stood just after passing by. At this time, the man was the most attractive, naturally handsome, and extraordinary, and the student representatives became red with excitement. I lost my face and heard that the emperor wanted to set up a royal library near the Imperial College for borrowing and copying by the people all over the world who wanted to study. They all knelt down to thank the emperor for his grace for the students all over the world. Now they think that this library is only open to scholars, but in fact, it is open to all the people in the world. After explaining the reason why he summoned them, Qi Ziyuan began to cry for poverty. He told the student representatives that because Daki was still under construction, he had to arrange for refugees, to recuperate with low taxes, and to build water conservancy projects to guard against the eyes of Xixia Dajin and others. Neighboring countries have to spend money in all aspects, so the treasury is out of money, and his internal treasury can run in it because of supporting the treasury, but he also knows that education is a national plan, so he can't neglect it. He still has no ability to do it. What's more, we can only build a library first, so as to provide a reading path for people all over the world who are interested in reading. You are all excellent students in the Imperial College, and you are also role models for scholars in the world, so I will leave this matter to you first. You help me manage this library well, so that everyone who wants to read and wants to borrow books can read. To read the books you want, you must protect and manage the books in the library. The student representatives did not expect the emperor to be so amiable, and they all knelt on the ground and expressed their willingness to do their best for the emperor. The emperor personally came down to help them up, and sighed and talked about the misunderstanding of him by the students and scholars of the Kuaziji and the reduction of troops. The emperor said that he didn't like fighting. He was a peace-loving emperor. He suffered from wars since he was a child. They are soldiers in the army, and no one wants to fight, because for scholars, fighting means that the treasury is empty, but for them, fighting means that they may lose their lives, and their parents, wives, and children will lose their pillars and live alone. But why can't the number of troops be reduced now? Just look at the situation of Dezhou in the previous dynasty to understand. The previous dynasty retreated again and again, so that half of the country was lost, and they could only settle in the south of the Yangtze River. Now the relationship between the 3 countries has eased, but their lost land has not been fully recovered. In the north and west, there are still many Han brothers and sisters who have suffered from the Dajin and Xixia. Slavery is difficult, he can't ignore them, and he can't follow the old way of Dazhu, so the soldiers can't be reduced. He can only release the soldiers when they regain their homeland, and Daki is so strong that Dajin Xixia dare not invade. Returning home, fulfilling their dream of family reunion. In short, Qi Ziyuan changed Qi Heiran's angry words into sad and sympathetic ones, and combined with his image of tears in his eyes, the 10 student representatives and the 3 Quasigian doctors wanted to grab the ground with their heads, and immediately gave up for him. It's good for him to be smug. Not only the 10 student representatives, but also the 3 PhDs who are nearing the destiny also expressed that they would refute the emperor's rumors among the scholars and prevent them from being influenced by one party's words. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 962. I don't know if Chi Ziyuan was too provocative, or was affected by the 2 big boxes full of eas left in the hall. The courtiers became more nervous than ever, and it even affected the people in the capital. Now all the people in the capital know the emperor is short of money. And De Chi inherited De Zhou's open speech. As a scholar, the freedom of speech is as wide as the vast prairie. I don't know who is bewitched and instructed. The students in Beijing Middle School gradually have the speech of reducing the number of troops, which even affects them. The officials and censors in the court asked them to write a letter asking the court to reduce military expenditures and troops. Because only a few people mentioned it like this, it didn't affect the overall situation, so Chi Ziyuan didn't take it seriously at first, but just dismissed their papers. Who knew that within 2 days in Beijing, the emperor would do this to protect the king of Rongjun? The king was warlike and vicious, and he didn't want to reduce his troops. The emperor wrote the memorial because he was afraid that the king of Rongjun would be provoked and confront his courtiers. This kind of talk has become more and more popular in the past 2 days, and some unsightly officials have even used it as a basis to demand that King Rong be brought to justice and the number of soldiers should be reduced. Chi Ziyuan was almost so angry that he killed someone. According to the procedure, when Chi Heiran was impeached, he would go to the court to defend himself. Chi Ziyuan was afraid that he would act impulsively without knowing anything, so he sent him a letter to tell him the whole story. Who knew that Chi Heiran would still explode? What if he knows how to fight? He co-authored to fill in the lives of the soldiers. Do you really think he likes being in troubled times and fighting all the time? I won't talk about the first point, only the second point, which is completely nonsense. Since the founding of Daki, when did he start a war and use the money from the treasury to fight a war? His military exploits were all built before the establishment of Daki. Even the friction with Zixia last time was the first move by Zixia. He also controlled the situation and did not expand the scale. Not only did Daki and Zixia Dajin take the opportunity after making peace, did you bring back a piece of lost soil from Zixia, and is there a big gold mine on it? Chi Heiran couldn't listen to Chi Ziyuan's explanation at all. He directly pulled out the notebook and wrote all his anger on it, and copied a copy to send to Chi Ziyuan when he was done, and then quickly sent the notebook. This time, the letter to Chi Ziyuan didn't use pigeons, it was a secret letter, so when Chi Ziyuan received it, his note had already entered Beijing, and it was impossible for him to intercept the note. Chi Heiran is angry because if this matter is confirmed, he will become a traitor, a Ling will become the wife of the traitor, and all his sons will become the sons of the traitor. Why? Obviously he is one of De Chi's heroes, but Chi Heiran doesn't make any merits and demerits. If future generations can comment on it, can future generations know what happened now? His merits and demerits can be judged by him, his subordinate soldiers and the people of Daki, and there is no need to leave them to future generations. Mu Yangling had read his notes, and she had never seen such harsh words from him before. Mu Yangling knew that Chi Heiran was really angry. Chi Heiran gritted his teeth and said, I hate Qin Fang so much, but they actually classify me as Qin Fang, it's unreasonable. Mu Yangling said weakly, this kind of talk is only spread by a few people. Look at Brother Rong, the Prime Minister on the right and the officials from various ministries are all speaking for you. They don't support the reduction of troops. But in the eyes of those scholars, this is just a fact that the master's power is in the hands of the government and the people, and he can influence the government. Since there is already a quarrel, let's break things apart and argue one by one. Mu Yangling felt that Qi Heiran was stupid, and said, arguing with scholars and officials with words, isn't this using your own weaknesses to compete with the others' strengths? Where have you learned the art of war? Qi Heiran rolled his eyes, I want to use my strengths to fight against others' weaknesses. The key is the emperor willing? Do you know what my master is good at? My master is good at fighting and killing people. Could it be that you let me directly lead a team of soldiers, immediately arrested and killed all those scholars? That would really confirm the reputation of treacherous ministers. How stupid this is. Yeah, you are Sun Moon Yinhui, they are fireflies at most, how can they compare to you? It is not worthwhile for you to get angry with them now, you might as well ignore this matter, and directly ignore and despise them when dealing with such people. What makes them feel the most uncomfortable is that you are talking to them, don't you send them to your door for abuse. In the end, Mu Yangling still didn't want Qi Heiran to confront those scholars, who spoke like knives. Heiran did nothing wrong, why should he run up to be cut by their knives? Moreover, his temper has become more and more serious recently, and Mu Yangling is afraid that he will be angry with him. Qi Heiran disagreed, got up and said in a cold voice, I'm afraid they will only become more rampant if left unchecked. Isn't the reduction of troops in the previous dynasty the result of scholars complaining that the military expenditure in the court was too high, and the civil servants fueled the flames? When Dazu lost a large area of land, they jumped out and scolded the soldiers for not resisting and losing the land. Li Zhenjai was at fault, but those scholars and civil officials should not even try to get away clean. In short, if I endure this time, next time they will really don't stop until the troops are downsized. Is it time to downsize the troops? The land has not been harvested, and the Dajin and Xixia have been eyeing it. If I cut the army today, tomorrow the Dajin cavalry will be able to swing their swords south. Qi Heiran is extremely strong on this point. Mu Yangling propped his chin and thought for a while. He couldn't let Heiran and the group of scholars confront each other to find abuse, and he couldn't let Heiran bow his head to avoid it. Then he could only wrong the elder brother. Who told him to be both the elder brother and the emperor? Mu Yangling sent a letter to Qi Ziyuan on Fiji, telling him that Heiran was very angry and the consequences would be serious. In order not to hurt him, he should be there to appease those scholars. Of course, they can't give in, because they really can't disarm. But for scholars, there are some who don't eat hard and soft, but there are also those who eat both hard and soft. For those who don't eat hard and soft, they can reason with them. If the reasoning doesn't make sense, write down their names. People really don't need it. For those who eat both soft and hard things, it is even more important to reason. Talking about the soft truth first, and then talking about the hard truth can always convince people. Scholars have always been dissatisfied with scholars, and they are the easiest to be persuaded by scholars. Instead of talking to scholars who are full of guard, it is better to let their insiders persuade them. Someone can stir up opinions in it, and they can naturally operate in it. Qi Ziyuan took Fiji's biography and thought about it for a while, thinking that he was about to use the library to attract the attention of scholars, so he took the opportunity to meet with a few students from the Imperial College, and asked them to pass the message on behalf of the court. Acting, who wouldn't? Moreover, what Qi Ziyuan said was not a joke. When the country is unified and the world is peaceful, he really intends to disarm and return troops to the people. The 10 student representatives returned to the Kuazijian with tears in their eyes, and began to discuss how to do their best for the court, the country, and the king. Because the books in the library were still being published, they first discussed the issue of disarmament.